Marcus Bennett thought he'd work himself to death, paying off $340,000 in medical debt. Then one Saturday morning at his favorite deli, he did something that seemed completely pointless at the time. 18 months later, the debt was gone. This is how it happened. The smell of fresh concrete and sawdust had become Marcus Bennett's cologne. At 52 years old, he could identify different types of wood by scent alone, a skill that impressed exactly nobody who could help him pay his bills. He stood on the third floor of the half-finished apartment complex on East Washington Street. Indianapolis spread out before him like a promise the city had forgotten to keep. His phone buzzed. Another text from the billing department at IU Health Methodist Hospital. Marcus didn't need to read it. He knew the number by heart, $340,217.36. He always remembered the cents. Something about those 36 cents made the whole thing feel more real, like someone had actually sat down and calculated exactly how much his wife's life was worth in medical procedures. "Bennett, you gonna stand there daydreaming, or you gonna help Rodriguez with that beam?" Tommy Chen, the site foreman, hollered from below. Tommy was 10 years younger than Marcus, but had already gone grey. Construction did that to you. Or maybe it was managing guys like Marcus, who sometimes forgot they were holding power tools. "On it, boss," Marcus called back, shaking off the fog. The fog had become his constant companion over the past 3 years, ever since Sarah's accident on I-465, ever since the cancer diagnosis that came 6 months later, like the universe had decided one catastrophe wasn't enough. Sarah had survived. That was the important part. That was what he told himself every morning at 4:30 when his alarm went off for his first job, and every afternoon at 2 when he left to drive across town to his second one. She had survived, even if their savings, their retirement fund, and their daughter's college education had not. The beam was heavier than it looked. Everything always was. Marcus and Carlos Rodriguez, a 30-year-old with arms like tree trunks and a laugh that could shake scaffolding, hoisted it into place. The November wind cut through Marcus's jacket, and he felt the familiar ache in his lower back, the one that started talking to him around hour 10 of any workday. "You okay, old man?" Carlos grinned, wiping his forehead with a forearm. "Old man? I can still outwork you with one hand tied behind my back," Marcus shot back, though they both knew it wasn't quite true anymore. Time had a way of collecting its debts too, and Marcus's body was paying in installments. Sure. That's why you were standing up there looking like you were solving world hunger." Marcus chuckled despite himself. "Just world debt. Hunger's too easy." They worked in companionable silence for a while, the rhythm of construction a language Marcus had spoken for 30 years. He'd started on sites like this when he was 22, newly married to Sarah, both of them convinced they'd have the world figured out by 40. They'd been wrong, but they'd been happy being wrong together. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Emma. "Dad, can we talk tonight after your shift at Menards?" Marcus checked his watch. He'd be done at the hardware store by 10, home by 10:30 if traffic on Keystone Avenue cooperated. "Sure, sweetie. Everything okay?" 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, "Yeah, just need to talk." That couldn't be good. Emma had moved back home after dropping out of Butler University halfway through her junior year. The guilt of that decision sat on Marcus's chest like a physical weight. She'd been studying graphic design, making plans, building a future. Now she worked at a coffee shop on Massachusetts Avenue, pouring lattes for people living the life she was supposed to have. The afternoon crawled by. Marcus's mind did what it always did these days, spinning through numbers like a broken slot machine. The mortgage, $2,400 a month. The medical bills, minimum payment of $3,000. Sarah's medications, $800. Food, utilities, gas for the truck that was one bad day away from death. Emma's car insurance. The property tax bill, coming due in May. At 2 o'clock, Marcus clocked out, his hands still tingling from the vibration of power tools. The drive to Menards took 30 minutes, just enough time for his body to stiffen up before he had to start moving again. He pulled into the parking lot off East 86th Street, the massive home improvement store looming like an orange and blue cathedral to the Church of Home Repair. "Marcus, you're early." Janet Kowalski, his supervisor, greeted him with the kind of enthusiasm that only someone who genuinely loved organizing plumbing fixtures could muster. Janet was 63, had been with Menards for 27 years, and treated the lumber department like it was her personal kingdom. "Traffic was light," Marcus said, punching in. "Well, since you're here, we got a whole pallet of 2x4s that came in wrong. Need to be sorted and restocked." Of course they did. Marcus nodded, grabbed his work gloves, and headed to the loading area. His back sent up a flare of protest. He ignored it. The back could join the long line of body parts filing complaints. The evening shift at Menards had a different energy than construction. Here, he helped weekend warriors pick out screws, explained the difference between various grades of plywood to confused homeowners, and occasionally prevented disasters when someone tried to buy entirely the wrong materials for their ambitious projects. There was something almost meditative about it, this second act of his workday. Around 8, during a rare lull, Marcus found himself standing in the break room, staring at the coffee maker like it held answers. His reflection in the chrome surface looked older than 52. The grey in his beard had spread like winter frost, and the lines around his eyes had deepened into canyons. "You know, staring at it won't make better coffee," came a voice from behind him. Marcus turned to find Ray Patterson, a part-timer who was supposedly retired but seemed to work as many hours as anyone. Ray was 71, built like a fire hydrant, and had opinions about everything from carburetor repair to international diplomacy. "Just thinking," Marcus said. "Dangerous pastime." Ray poured himself a cup of the sludge that Menards optimistically called coffee. "You got that look? The one I used to see in the mirror about 15 years ago." "What look is that?" "The, how did I end up here look. The, I'm doing everything right and it's still all wrong look." Ray settled into one of the plastic chairs that squeaked under any weight over 100 pounds. "Let me guess, medical bills?" Marcus shouldn't have been surprised. It was Indiana. Everyone knew someone drowning in medical debt. It was practically a state pastime, along with basketball and complaining about the weather. "That obvious? Son, you're working construction and retail. Nobody does that because they love variety." Marcus laughed, a sound that surprised him with its bitterness. $340,000. My wife got better, but apparently miracles have payment plans now. Ray whistled low. "That's a lot of 2x4s. That's a lot of everything." They sat in silence for a moment, the fluorescent lights humming their eternal song. From the store floor came the sound of someone dropping what sounded like an entire display of paint cans. Ray didn't even flinch. "You know what your problem is," Ray said finally. "I've got a list." "Which one are we talking about?" "You're trying to dig yourself out with the same shovel that got you in the hole." Marcus frowned. "That's very profound, Ray, but I'm not sure it actually means anything. It means you can't work your way out of this. Not at construction wages, not at retail wages, not even at both combined, not in any timeline that doesn't end with you dead from exhaustion at 55. "Well, that's cheerful. Thanks for the pep talk." Ray leaned forward, his eyes sharp despite his age. "I'm not trying to depress you. I'm trying to wake you up. You need something different, something that doesn't trade your hours for dollars because you're running out of hours to trade." Marcus wanted to argue, but the truth was sitting there between them like a third person in the conversation. He was exhausted, bone-deep, soul-tired, exhausted, and he wasn't making progress. He was treading water in an ocean of debt, and the shore wasn't getting any closer. "Different like what?" Marcus asked. "I'm a construction worker, Ray. It's what I know. It's what I'm good at." "Then be good at it differently." Ray stood up, his knees popping like bubble wrap. "Figure out how to make the knowledge worth more than the labor. But what do I know? I'm just an old man selling screws." Ray left, and Marcus sat there with his terrible coffee, turning the words over in his mind. Make the knowledge worth more than the labor. Easy to say. Harder to do when you were 52, tired, and couldn't remember the last time you'd done something just because you wanted to. His phone buzzed. A reminder about tomorrow morning. Right. Saturday. His one morning off, and he'd promised Sarah he'd take her to Shapiro's Delicatessen for breakfast. It was their tradition, started 3 years ago during her recovery. Every Saturday morning, if he wasn't working, they'd sit in that old deli and pretend just for an hour that everything was normal. Marcus finished his shift, drove home through the quiet Indianapolis streets, and found Emma waiting up for him at the kitchen table. The conversation, as it turned out, was about her wanting to go back to school. She'd been saving tips, had a plan, wanted his blessing. He gave it, even though the thought of more debt, more sacrifice, made his chest tight. Because what else could he do? Stop his daughter from having a future because he couldn't figure out how to afford one. That night, Marcus lay in bed next to Sarah, listening to her breathe. She was asleep, finally at peace after another day of managing pain and pretending she wasn't managing pain. He stared at the ceiling, Ray's words circling in his mind like vultures. Make the knowledge worth more than the labor. But how? Outside, Indianapolis slept under a November sky. Somewhere in the city, people were figuring it out. Somewhere, someone was finding the answer Marcus needed. He just had to hope he'd find it before the weight of all those numbers finally crushed him completely. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of gray sky that made Indianapolis look like a pencil sketch. Marcus woke at 6:30, which felt luxurious compared to his usual 4:30 alarm. His body didn't know what to do with the extra 2 hours and ached in confusion. Sarah was already up, sitting at the kitchen table with her tea and the crossword puzzle from the Indianapolis Star. She looked good today. The good days were becoming more frequent, something Marcus tried not to think about too hard, afraid that acknowledging it might jinx it somehow. "Ready for Shapiro's?" she asked, her reading glasses perched on her nose in that way that still made his heart do a stupid little flip after 30 years. "Born ready for pastrami," Marcus said, kissing the top of her head. Her hair had grown back differently after the chemotherapy, curly where it used to be straight. She claimed to hate it. He thought it was beautiful. The drive to Shapiro's Delicatessen took 15 minutes. The restaurant had been an Indianapolis institution since 1905, sitting on South Meridian Street like a time capsule filled with the smell of fresh rye bread and corned beef. Marcus and Sarah had discovered it years ago, back when Emma was little, and Saturday mornings meant pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse. Now it meant something different. It meant survival. It meant they were still here, still together, still finding reasons to get up and face another week. The deli was busy, as always. Families crowded into booths, solo diners hunched over newspapers at the counter, and the sound of conversation mixed with the clatter of dishes created a symphony of normal life that Marcus craved like oxygen. "Bennett, party of two," called out Maria, the hostess who'd been working there longer than some of the fixtures. She led them to their usual booth near the window, the one with the slightly wobbly table that Marcus always meant to fix, but never did. "The usual?" their server Derek asked before they'd even settled in. Derek was 24, studying nursing at IUPUI, and had dreams of working in pediatrics. Marcus knew this because Derek was a talker, and Marcus had become a good listener. "You know it," Sarah said with a smile that Marcus recognized as her putting on a good-face smile. The pain was there today, lurking beneath the surface. He could always tell. Marcus ordered his standard: scrambled eggs, corned beef hash, rye toast. Sarah got oatmeal and fruit, her appetite still not back to what it used to be. They shared a pot of coffee that tasted like it had been brewed by someone who actually cared about coffee, unlike the battery acid at Menard's. "So," Sarah said, wrapping her hands around her mug, "Emma told me about wanting to go back to Butler." "Yeah." Marcus stared at his coffee like it might have answers. It didn't. Coffee never did. "Marcus, we can't afford it." "I know. But you told her yes anyway." "I know that too." Sarah reached across the table and took his hand. Her fingers were warm from the mug, small in his calloused palm. "We can't save her by drowning ourselves." "I'm not drowning. I'm swimming. Very slowly." "Honey, you're working 80 hours a week. That's not swimming. That's barely keeping your head above water." Marcus wanted to argue, but the truth was sitting there between them like an unwelcome third guest. He was tired. So tired. And it wasn't getting better. "Ray at Menard said something yesterday," Marcus started, then trailed off. "Ray, the guy who fought in Vietnam and once fixed a forklift with duct tape and a prayer?" "That's the one. He said I need to make my knowledge worth more than my labor." Sarah considered this, her head tilted in that way she did when she was really thinking. "That's actually pretty smart. What does that look like?" "No idea. I'm a construction worker, Sarah. I know how to frame a house, not how to monetize my expertise." He made air quotes around the last word, feeling ridiculous. "You're more than just a construction worker, Marcus Bennett." "Oh yeah? What else am I?" Besides a human credit card debt? Sarah kicked him under the table, gentle but firm. Stop it, you're a problem solver. You're the guy everyone calls when they can't figure out why their deck is sinking or their drywall keeps cracking. You're the one who taught half the guys on your crew how to read blueprints properly. That's just being good at my job. That's called having expertise, dummy. Their food arrived, and they ate in comfortable silence for a while. Marcus watched the people around them. A family with 3 kids, the youngest drawing on the paper tablecloth with crayons. An elderly couple holding hands across the table, not talking, just being. A businessman in a rumpled suit, eating alone while scrolling through his phone. Everyone had a story, everyone was carrying something. Marcus pulled out a napkin and, without really thinking about it, started writing. Just a few lines. A description of the businessman, imagining what had brought him to a deli alone on a Saturday morning. It was something he used to do when he was younger, before life got in the way. Before the bills and the responsibilities and the endless hamster wheel of just getting through the day. "What are you doing?" Sarah asked, watching him with curious eyes. "Nothing. I don't know. There's a story there, you know, in that guy. You used to do that all the time, write little stories. Yeah, well, stories don't pay the mortgage. Neither does hating yourself for working 2 jobs. Marcus looked up, surprised by the sharpness in her voice. Sarah's eyes were bright with something that wasn't quite tears, but wasn't far off either. "I don't hate—" "Yes, you do. I see it, Marcus. Every morning when you drag yourself out of bed, every night when you come home too tired to even watch TV, you hate what this has turned you into." "Sarah, I'm not blaming you. God, I'm grateful for you. But I didn't survive cancer, so you could kill yourself working." The table wobbled. Marcus steadied it with his knee, an automatic gesture he'd done 100 times. Around them, life at Shapiro's continued, oblivious to the small crisis happening in Booth 7. "I don't know what else to do," Marcus said quietly. "Start with this." Sarah reached across and tapped the napkin. "Start with something that makes you feel like Marcus again, not just a machine for earning money." Marcus looked down at his scribbles. It wasn't much. Just a few sentences about a man eating breakfast alone, but it had felt good to write them, like scratching an itch he'd forgotten he had. It's just a hobby. It doesn't mean anything. Maybe it doesn't have to mean anything. Maybe it just has to be something that's yours. Derek came by to refill their coffee and clear their plates. "You folks need anything else? More coffee? Pie? Unsolicited life advice?" "We're good on all counts," Marcus said with a smile. "Speak for yourself." "I'll take pie," Sarah said. "Apple. With ice cream." "A woman after my own heart," Derek said, scribbling on his pad. "Though I should warn you, our pie is dangerously good. People have been known to make poor life decisions after eating it." After Derek left, Sarah leaned back in the booth looking more relaxed than she had in weeks. "This is nice. Us. Here. No hospitals, no bills, no stress. Just pie and coffee and Saturday morning." "Yeah," Marcus agreed. "It is." He picked up the napkin again, read over what he'd written. It was rough, probably terrible, but there was something there. A voice. A perspective. Maybe Sarah was right. Maybe he needed something that was his, something that wasn't about debt or duty or just surviving another week. "Tell you what," Marcus said. "I'll make a deal with you. I'll keep writing these little stories, these observations, whatever they are. If nothing comes of it, at least I spent some time not thinking about bills. And if something does come of it, then I owe you a fancy dinner somewhere that doesn't serve food on paper plates. Deal." Sarah extended her hand across the table, and they shook on it like they were business partners instead of spouses drowning in medical debt. The pie arrived, and it was indeed dangerously good. They shared it, trading bites and comfortable silence. Through the window, Indianapolis woke up properly. People walked dogs. Joggers huffed past in their cold-weather gear, and the morning sun finally decided to make an appearance, turning the grey city golden. Marcus pulled out another napkin and started writing again, this time about an elderly couple 3 booths over, the way they communicated without words. Decades of marriage compressed into small gestures and knowing glances. His hand moved faster, the words coming easier. "You're smiling," Sarah observed. "Am I?" "You are. It's nice." "I'd forgotten what that looked like." Marcus reached for her hand again. "I love you, you know that?" "I know, even though you're terrible at showing it when you're exhausted and cranky." "I'm not cranky. You're the crankiest person I know. You make Oscar the Grouch look cheerful. That's fair. They left Shapiro's an hour later, Marcus with 3 napkins covered in scribbles tucked into his jacket pocket. The day stretched ahead of them, free and unscheduled. They drove home slowly, taking the long way through downtown, past the Soldiers and Sailors Monument, around Monument Circle where street performers were setting up for the weekend crowds. At home, Marcus went to the garage, pulled out an old notebook he'd bought years ago and never used. He sat on the back porch despite the November chill, and he started transferring his napkin stories into the notebook, expanding them, adding details, letting the words flow without judgment. Sarah watched from the kitchen window, sipping her tea, and for the first time in 3 years, she felt something like hope. Not for the bills or the debt or Emma's future. Just hope that her husband might remember who he was before the world had tried to beat it out of him. And in the garage, surrounded by tools and sawdust and the physical evidence of a life spent building things for other people, Marcus Bennett began to build something for himself, even if he had no idea what it would become. 3 weeks passed. Marcus kept writing in his notebook during lunch breaks, on Sunday afternoons, and every Saturday morning at Shapiro's. The napkins piled up. The notebook filled. It became a habit, then a need, then something close to an addiction. The stories were simple things. Observations about the guys on his construction crew, the regulars at Menard's who came in every week for projects that never seemed to finish. The way Indianapolis looked at dawn when he drove to his first job, the city still half asleep and full of possibility. He didn't know what he was doing with them. He just knew he felt better writing them. "You know, you could share those," Emma said one evening. She'd walked into the kitchen and caught him scribbling at the table, surrounded by coffee cups and the debris of dinner. Marcus looked up, slightly guilty, like he'd been caught doing something embarrassing. "Share them how?" "I don't know, online. There are platforms for that kind of thing, Medium, Substack, even just Facebook." "Emma, I'm 52. I barely know how to use Facebook. Last week I accidentally posted a photo of my lunch to someone's memorial page." Emma laughed, the sound bright and unexpected in their small kitchen. "That's because you don't read what you're clicking on. But seriously, Dad, these are good. I read some of them when you left the notebook on the couch." "You read my notebook? You left it open on the couch. That's basically an invitation, and before you get mad, they're really good, funny and real, and I don't know. They made me see people differently." Marcus felt a flush of something he couldn't quite name. Pride, maybe, or embarrassment, or both. "They're just observations, Em. Nothing special. That's where you're wrong. They're stories about normal people doing normal things, and somehow you make that interesting. Do you know how rare that is?" He didn't. He figured everyone could do what he did, notice things, wonder about the lives behind the faces. Apparently not. "I wouldn't even know where to start," Marcus said. "Let me help you. I used to do social media for the Butler Design Club before I dropped out. I know how this works." That night, Emma set up accounts. A Facebook page called Construction Chronicles. An Instagram Marcus didn't understand. She took his notebook, picked 3 stories and posted them. Marcus watched like someone watching their house being demolished, equal parts fascinated and horrified. "There," Emma said, hitting publish on the 3rd one. "Now we wait." For what? For people to find them. Or not. That's kind of how the internet works. It's chaos with occasional purpose. Marcus went to bed that night feeling strange about having his words out in the world. He dreamed about concrete and napkins and numbers that wouldn't stop growing. He forgot about the posts entirely, until Monday morning at the construction site when Carlos Rodriguez walked up to him with his phone out and a grin splitting his face. Dude, is this you?" Carlos shoved the phone at him. It was Marcus's story about the construction crew, the one about how every site had the same cast of characters, the guy who always lost his tools, the one who knew everything about sports, the supervisor who spoke only in football metaphors, the quiet guy who solved problems nobody else could see. "Where did you find that?" Marcus asked, his stomach doing something uncomfortable. "It's everywhere, man. Someone shared it in the Indiana Construction Workers group on Facebook. It's got like 2,000 likes already. People are tagging their co-workers saying this is so accurate it hurts." Marcus's hands went cold. 2,000 people had read something he wrote. 2,000 strangers had seen inside his head. "You okay?" Carlos asked. "You look like you're gonna pass out." I'm fine, just surprised. Surprised? Man, this is awesome. You should write more. Do one about Tommy and his coffee addiction. For about that time we had to explain to the new kid why we don't use a level on a level surface. Word spread through the construction site like wildfire in dry grass. By lunch, everyone knew. Tommy Chen gave him a thumbs up from across the site. Even the client, a real estate developer named Patricia Novak, who usually only communicated in barely contained rage, stopped by to say she'd read it. "Made me laugh," she said, which was the closest thing to a compliment Marcus had ever heard from her. "You got any more?" At Menard's that evening, it was worse. Or better. Marcus couldn't decide which. Janet had printed out the story and taped it to the break room wall. Ray Patterson sat there reading it, chuckling to himself. "Well, well," Ray said when Marcus walked in, "look who's famous." "I'm not famous. It's just a thing that happened. Kid, you've got people talking. That's more than most people accomplish in a lifetime. What are you going to do with it?" I don't know. I didn't expect anyone to read them." "That's because you're an idiot," Ray said affectionately. "You've been sitting on this ability for how long? Writing in notebooks nobody sees? It's not an ability, I just write down what I see." "Yeah, and most people look at the same things and see nothing. That's called talent, Marcus. Don't be stupid about it." That night, Marcus sat with his laptop, the ancient Dell that Emma had used in high school, and looked at the numbers. The story had been shared 3,000 times now. The comments were overwhelming. People telling their own construction stories, sharing their own experiences, tagging friends, family, co-workers. "This is the most accurate thing I've ever read about working construction," one comment said. "I laughed so hard I snorted coffee out my nose," said another. "Please write more," said at least 50 people. Sarah came up behind him, reading over his shoulder. "Marcus Bennett, secret internet sensation. It's weird. It's wonderful. People like your writing. They like one story. That doesn't mean anything. Then write another one and see what happens." So he did. He wrote about his first day working construction 30 years ago, when he'd shown up in brand new boots that gave him blisters by noon, and an old-timer named George had taught him that construction wasn't about being tough. It was about being smart enough to save your strength for when it mattered. Emma posted it Tuesday morning. By Tuesday evening, it had 5,000 shares. Wednesday, Marcus wrote about Menard's, about the peculiar ecology of a hardware store, the way every employee developed a specialty and a personality. Janet, who knew the location of every single item in the store like she had GPS in her brain. Ray, who could solve any customer problem with a combination of wisdom and sarcasm. Derek, who worked weekends to pay for nursing school and somehow made restocking light bulbs look like a calling. Thursday morning, that story had 8,000 shares and had been picked up by a regional news blog. "This is insane," Marcus said to Sarah over breakfast. He'd woken up to 73 notifications on Facebook, a concept that would have been incomprehensible to him a month ago. "This is an opportunity," Sarah corrected. "People are connecting with your voice, Marcus. They see themselves in your stories. But what do I do with it? I can't pay bills with Facebook likes." "Not yet." But this is attention. Attention can become something. Friday afternoon, while Marcus was helping a customer pick out the right screws for a deck repair, his phone rang. The number was local but unfamiliar. "Mr. Bennett, this is Cynthia Rodriguez from Wish TV. We're doing a segment on local voices and viral stories. Would you be willing to come in for an interview?" Marcus looked around Menard's at the shelves of screws and the fluorescent lights and his reflection in the window of a display refrigerator. He looked tired. He looked old. He looked like a man who had stumbled into something he didn't understand. Sure, yes, when? Monday work for you? Say 10 in the morning?" Monday was a work day, both jobs. He'd have to call in, make excuses, juggle schedules. But something in his chest, some small flame that had been barely flickering, suddenly burned brighter. "Monday works," Marcus said. That Saturday at Shapiro's, Marcus couldn't write. His hands were shaking slightly, adrenaline or fear or something else entirely. Sarah watched him with knowing eyes. "You're allowed to be excited," she said. "I'm terrified." "That too. But Marcus, something good is happening. Let yourself have this." Derek brought their usual order and a slice of pie they hadn't requested. "This one's on me," he said. "Read your stories. You made my mum cry with the one about the hardware store guys. She worked retail her whole life, said you captured something true." After Derek left, Marcus stared at the free pie like it was evidence of a crime. "This is all happening too fast. Or maybe it's happening exactly when it needs to," Sarah said. "You've been working yourself to death for 3 years, Marcus. If the universe wants to throw you a break, maybe don't question it, maybe just catch it." The pie was apple, warm and perfect. They ate it slowly, savoring each bite. Through the window, Indianapolis moved through its Saturday morning rhythm. People living their lives, carrying their stories, most of them never to be told. But Marcus's story was being told, and people were listening. He just hoped he could figure out what to do with that before the moment passed, and the internet moved on to the next thing, the way it always did. In his pocket, his phone buzzed with another notification. Then another. Then another. The accidental audience was growing, and Marcus Bennett, construction worker and unlikely writer, was about to learn what that meant. The Wish TV studio on North Meridian Street was smaller than Marcus expected. He'd imagined something grand, Hollywood scale, but it was just a modest building with cameras and bright lights and people rushing around like they were constantly 5 minutes behind schedule. Cynthia Rodriguez turned out to be a woman in her 30s with sharp eyes and a smile that suggested she'd seen everything twice. She shook Marcus's hand with the grip of someone who meant business. "Thanks for coming in, Mr. Bennett. I love your stories. My dad worked construction for 40 years. Reading your stuff made me understand him better." Marcus felt that now familiar flush of embarrassment and pride. "I'm just writing what I see." "That's the best kind of writing. Okay, we'll do a quick 5-minute segment. Just be yourself. Talk about why you started writing, what you hope people get from it. Easy." It was not easy. Under the lights, with the camera pointed at him like an accusation, Marcus forgot how to form sentences. His mouth went dry. His hands wouldn't stop fidgeting. "Relax," Cynthia said gently. "Pretend we're just talking over coffee. Tell me about the construction story, the first one that went viral." Something about her tone helped. Marcus took a breath and started talking. About the crew, about the familiar characters on every job site, about how construction work was like theater, except the set pieces were heavier and the audience could sue you if you messed up. Cynthia laughed. The camera operator laughed. Marcus relaxed. They talked for 15 minutes, though only 5 would air. When it was over, Cynthia walked him out. "You're a natural," she said. "Ever think about doing this professionally?" "Doing what? Talking?" "Writing. Speaking. There's a market for authentic voices, Marcus. People are tired of polish, they want real." Marcus drove back to the construction site, thinking about that word. Real. He'd been real his whole life. It had never been worth anything before. The segment aired Wednesday evening. Marcus watched it at home with Sarah and Emma. All 3 of them squeezed onto the couch like they used to do for movie nights when Emma was little. "Oh God, I look old," Marcus said when his face filled the screen. "You look distinguished," Sarah corrected. "You look like Dad," Emma added helpfully. But watching himself talk about the stories, about finding meaning in everyday work, about the dignity of labor and the characters that made construction sites come alive, it didn't feel as cringeworthy as he'd expected. He sounded genuine, real, like Cynthia had said. His phone started buzzing before the segment even ended. Facebook notifications, messages, friend requests from strangers. The Construction Chronicles page jumped from 5,000 followers to 15,000 by bedtime. Thursday morning, Marcus got to the construction site early. Tommy was waiting for him, coffee in hand and a weird expression on his face. "So, we got a call yesterday," Tommy said, "from a woman in Chicago. She runs some kind of consulting company. Wants to hire you to do a talk at their company retreat." Marcus blinked. "A talk about what?" "About construction. About work culture. About, I don't know, man. About the stuff you write about." She said she'd pay $2,000 for a 1-hour presentation. The number hit Marcus like a physical thing. $2,000. That was nearly a month's payment on the medical bills for 1 hour. "That's insane." "That's what I said. But she was serious. Said she saw you on the news, read your stories, thinks you have something her employees need to hear." Tommy handed him a business card. "Her name's Jennifer Hartley. She wants you to call her." Marcus put the card in his pocket, where it felt like it was burning through the denim. $2,000 for talking about something he knew. Make the knowledge worth more than the labor. Ray's words came back to him, sharp and clear. At lunch, sitting on a stack of lumber with his sandwich, Marcus called the number. Jennifer Hartley answered on the second ring. "Mr. Bennett, I'm so glad you called. I loved your interview. You have this way of talking about work that makes people remember why they do what they do." Thank you. Listen, I'll be direct. Our company does team-building retreats for corporations. We bring in speakers, facilitators, experts. But lately, our clients have been asking for something different, something more grounded. Your stories about construction, about teamwork, about finding dignity in hard work, that resonates. "Ma'am, I'm not a speaker. I'm a guy who writes in notebooks." "You're a storyteller who happens to work in construction. That's better. People can smell bullshit from motivational speakers a mile away. You're authentic. That's rare." She paused. $2,000, Mr. Bennett. 1 hour. You tell your stories, answer some questions, make people think about their own work differently. Are you interested? Marcus thought about the medical bills, about Sarah's medication, about Emma wanting to go back to school, about the fact that he'd just been offered a month's worth of debt payments for 60 minutes of talking. "Yes," he heard himself say. "I'm interested." "Fantastic. The retreat is in 2 weeks, downtown Chicago. I'll email you the details." Marcus hung up and stared at his phone like it had grown teeth. Carlos wandered over, eating an apple. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I think I just became a motivational speaker." "No shit, that's awesome. You gonna quit construction?" "What? No, it's just one thing, one talk." But even as he said it, Marcus felt something shifting. Like a door he hadn't known existed had suddenly opened, and he couldn't quite see what was on the other side, but it looked suspiciously like possibility. That night, Marcus tried to write his presentation. He sat at the kitchen table with his notebook, and nothing came. How was he supposed to turn his random observations into a structured talk? What did people even want to hear? Emma found him at midnight, surrounded by crumpled papers and cold coffee. "Dad, you're overthinking this. I have to talk to a room full of corporate people about construction work. How is that supposed to work? You just tell your stories, the same ones you've been writing. That's all they want." "But what if—" "Dad," Emma put her hand over his, stopping the anxious pen tapping. "You've been teaching people how to do construction for 30 years. You've trained probably 50 guys. This is the same thing, just in a different building." She was right, of course. Marcus had taught countless apprentices, explained complex concepts, broken down problems into understandable pieces. This was just teaching, with better pay. The next Saturday at Shapiro's, Marcus brought his notebook and actually worked on the presentation. Sarah helped, asking questions, pushing him to dig deeper into the stories. "Tell me about the time something went wrong on a site," she said. Marcus thought back. "Oh, there was this job about 5 years ago. The architect's drawings were wrong. They'd specified a beam that wouldn't support the load. Everyone was ready to just build it according to the plans. But this young guy, maybe 25, spoke up. He'd done the math, saw the problem. What happened? We stopped, checked his work. He was right. Saved us from a potential collapse, probably saved lives. But here's the thing, he was terrified to speak up. He was the newest guy on crew. Nobody had taught him it was okay to question the drawings. That's a good story. Is it? It's just what happened. Marcus, it's a story about how good leadership creates environments where people feel safe to speak up. That's what these corporate folks need to hear. It clicked then. His stories weren't just about construction. They were about people, about culture, about the small decisions that made the difference between a good workplace and a toxic one. He'd been living these lessons for 30 years without realizing they were lessons. Derek brought their food and noticed the notebook. "Working on something?" "He's preparing to become a professional speaker," Sarah said proudly. "No way. That's awesome. You gonna quit Menards?" "What?" "No. It's just one talk." But Derek grinned like he knew something Marcus didn't. "Sure, man, just one talk." The next week passed in a blur. Marcus worked his regular hours, wrote his presentation in the gaps, and tried not to think about the fact that he was going to stand in front of strangers and talk for an hour. Every time panic threatened, Emma would remind him, "You're just teaching. You've always been a teacher. The Facebook page kept growing. More stories, more shares, more comments from people who saw themselves in Marcus's words. Someone created a hashtag, Mund Construction Chronicles. It started trending in Indiana. Ray cornered him at Menard's on Friday night. "You're doing the thing." "What thing?" "Making the knowledge worth more than the labor. I told you that was the answer." "Ray, it's one talk. I'm not quitting my jobs." "Not yet." Ray's eyes were sharp, knowing. "But you will. Because once you realize you can make in 1 hour what takes you a week of breaking your back, you're not going to want to go back. I like construction. I know you do. But liking something doesn't mean it has to destroy your body. Think about it." Marcus did think about it. All through his shift, all through the drive home, all through the sleepless night before he was supposed to leave for Chicago. At 5 in the morning, he gave up on sleep and went to the kitchen. Sarah was already there, tea in hand, looking at him with those eyes that saw too much. "You're going to be great," she said. "You don't know that." "Yes, I do. Because you're going to stand up there and be yourself. And yourself is someone worth listening to." The drive to Chicago took 3 hours. Marcus spent most of it rehearsing his opening, which changed every 15 minutes. By the time he pulled into the hotel parking lot where the retreat was being held, he'd gone through approximately 73 versions and hated them all. Jennifer Hartley met him in the lobby. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe 40, wearing a blazer and jeans and an expression of such genuine warmth that some of Marcus's panic subsided. "You ready to change some lives?" she asked. Marcus laughed despite himself. "I'm ready to not throw up if that counts." "That definitely counts." "Come on, I'll show you the room." The conference room held about 60 people, all of them dressed in business casual, all of them looking at Marcus like he was supposed to have answers. He stood at the front, gripping his notebook, and forgot everything he'd planned to say. Then he looked at their faces and saw what he always saw. People. Just people, carrying their own stories, looking for connection, hoping someone would see them. "So," Marcus said, "let me tell you about the worst mistake I ever made on a construction site, and what a kid named Miguel taught me about leadership." And he began to talk. The hour flew. The audience laughed, asked questions, took notes. When it was over, people lined up to shake his hand, to tell him their own stories, to thank him for making them think about their work differently. Jennifer handed him a check for $2,000 and another business card. "My colleague in Detroit wants to book you next month," she said, "and I have 3 more clients interested. Mr. Bennett, I think you might have just found a second career." Marcus drove home in a daze, the check in his wallet feeling both real and impossible. He'd just made $2,000 by talking for an hour, and people wanted him to do it again, make the knowledge worth more than the labor. Maybe Ray had been right all along. Maybe everything was about to change. Marcus Bennett's life developed a strange rhythm over the next 6 weeks, Monday through Thursday. Construction sites and power tools. Friday and Saturday evenings, Menards and customer service. Sunday, writing. And scattered through it all, speaking engagements that paid more in 1 hour than he made in a week of physical labor. He'd done 4 talks now, Chicago twice, Detroit once, and a construction company conference in Fort Wayne. Each time, the check felt surreal. Each time, people told him he'd changed their perspective. Each time, Marcus drove home thinking, this can't last, but it did last. And it kept growing. The Construction Chronicles Facebook page hit 50,000 followers. Companies started emailing directly. A literary agent named Patricia Kern from New York sent a message asking if he'd ever considered writing a book. A book. Marcus Bennett, who'd barely passed English in high school, was being asked to write a book. "You should do it," Sarah said over breakfast one Saturday. They were home, not at Shapiro's. Marcus had a noon speaking gig at a leadership conference downtown. "I don't even know what the book would be about." "The same thing your stories are about. Work, dignity, finding meaning in everyday labor." Sarah buttered her toast with the precision of a surgeon. "Marcus, you've stumbled into something. Don't waste it by being scared." "I'm not scared. I'm realistic. This is probably a fluke. Next month everyone will forget about me and move on to the next thing." Emma walked in, already dressed for her shift at the coffee shop. "Dad, you've been saying that for 6 weeks. At some point, you have to accept that maybe you're actually good at this." "Or," Marcus countered, I could accept that I'm a construction worker who got lucky. Why can't you be both? Emma asked, grabbing an apple from the counter. It was a good question. Marcus didn't have a good answer. That afternoon's speaking engagement was at the Indianapolis Marriott downtown, a hotel on West Maryland Street that Marcus had walked past 1,000 times but never entered. The conference was called Leadership in Action, and he was scheduled between a former Navy SEAL and a Fortune 500 CEO. I don't belong here, Marcus muttered to himself in the bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie. He'd bought 3 ties now, which was 3 more than he'd owned in his entire life. They all felt like nooses. The event coordinator, a hyperactive woman named Ashley, found him backstage. "Mr. Bennett, we're so excited to have you. You're on in 10 minutes. Do you need anything? Water? Coffee? A last-minute pep talk? Maybe a paper bag to breathe into?" Ashley laughed like he was joking. He wasn't entirely joking. The auditorium held maybe 200 people. Business types mostly, the kind who wore suits on Saturdays and thought that was normal. Marcus stood in the wings, watching the Navy SEAL finish his presentation about leadership under fire. It was polished, rehearsed, impressive. Marcus's stories about teaching apprentices how to read blueprints suddenly felt small and inadequate. "You're up," Ashley whispered, giving him a gentle push toward the stage. Marcus walked out into the lights, his notes clutched in sweaty hands. The audience applauded politely, expectantly. He reached the microphone, opened his mouth to start his prepared introduction, and his mind went completely blank. Not partially blank, not forgot a word, blank. Completely, catastrophically empty. He stood there, frozen, while 200 people waited. The silence stretched. Someone coughed. Marcus felt sweat forming on his forehead. Then, without meaning to, he said, "I'm having a complete panic attack right now. Anyone else, or just me?" A few nervous laughs rippled through the audience. "Because I'm standing here," Marcus continued, unplanned words tumbling out, "looking at all of you in your nice suits, and I'm thinking, I'm a construction worker. I spent this morning explaining to a 20-year-old why we don't use a nail gun on finished carpentry. What am I doing here pretending I know anything about leadership?" More laughs, warmer this time. But then I remembered something. That 20-year-old, he's going to remember that lesson for his entire career. Because I didn't just tell him what to do, I showed him why it mattered. That's leadership, not the fancy kind you read about in books, the everyday kind, the kind that happens in muddy work boots and safety glasses. The audience was leaning forward now, engaged. Marcus abandoned his notes entirely. He told them about Miguel, the apprentice who'd saved a project by questioning bad drawings. About Janet at Menard's, who'd turned a minimum wage job into a calling by caring about excellence. About Sarah, who'd faced cancer with more courage than any soldier, and how watching her had taught him more about leadership than any seminar. He talked for 45 minutes, raw and unpolished, and completely honest. No corporate jargon, no buzzwords, just stories about real people doing real work. When he finished, the applause wasn't polite. It was thunderous. Afterward, people mobbed him. Business cards, handshakes, requests for follow-up conversations. A woman from a construction supply company wanted to hire him as a consultant. A publisher, an actual publisher from Simon & Schuster, asked if he was working with an agent yet. Marcus floated through it all in a daze. This was supposed to be a disaster. He'd frozen, panicked, thrown out his entire prepared speech, and somehow it had been the best talk he'd ever given. That evening at Shapiro's, they'd moved their tradition to Saturday nights when Marcus's schedule got crazy. Derek brought them pie without being asked and sat down in the booth with them. "Okay, I have to know. Are you actually famous now? Because someone at my nursing school showed me a video of you talking about workplace culture, and it had like 100,000 views." Marcus nearly choked on his coffee. 100,000? "Yeah. Someone recorded your talk today and posted it. It's everywhere. High Construction Chronicles is trending again." Sarah was already pulling out her phone. Sure enough, someone had filmed the entire presentation and posted it to YouTube. The title, "Construction Worker Has Panic Attack, Delivers Best Leadership Talk Ever." The comments were overwhelming. "This is the most genuine thing I've ever seen. I'd rather hear from this guy than another polished corporate speaker. He forgot his speech and still taught me more about leadership than my MBA program. Marcus watched himself on the tiny screen, watched the moment of panic, watched himself find his footing by being honest about being lost. It was vulnerable in a way that made him uncomfortable. It was also apparently exactly what people needed to see. "Marcus," Sarah said quietly, "I think you need to make a decision." "About what?" "About whether you're a construction worker who sometimes speaks, or a speaker who used to work construction." The words sat between them like a challenge. Emma, who'd joined them after her shift, nodded in agreement. "She's right, Dad. You can't keep doing both. You're going to burn out and then you'll have nothing. But construction is what I know. It's who I am." "No," Sarah said firmly. "Construction is what you did. Who you are is a guy who sees people clearly and helps them understand themselves better. That's a gift, Marcus, and it's worth more than you're valuing it." Marcus looked down at the slice of pie Derek had brought. Apple, as always. The same pie he'd been eating every Saturday for 3 years in the same booth with the same people he loved. Some things stayed constant, but some things had to change. "I'm terrified," he admitted. "Good," Sarah said. "That means it matters." That night, Marcus sat in his garage with his old notebook, the one where this had all started. He flipped back through the pages, reading his early observations, the simple stories he'd written, just to remember who he was, beneath the crushing weight of debt and exhaustion. He pulled out his phone and called Patricia Kern, the literary agent who'd emailed him weeks ago. It was late, but she answered on the third ring. "Mr. Bennett, I was hoping I'd hear from you." "I want to write the book," Marcus said. "But I need to tell you something first. I'm not a writer, I'm just a guy with stories." "Marcus, can I call you Marcus? The best writers are always just people with stories. The ones who think they're writers are usually the ones nobody wants to read. I'm going to need help. I've never written anything longer than 3 pages. That's what editors are for. The question is, do you have something to say?" Marcus looked around his garage, at the tools he'd collected over 30 years, at the sawdust on the floor and the half-finished projects that never seemed to get done, at the life he'd built with his hands. "Yeah," he said, "I have something to say." "Then let's make a book." They talked for an hour. Patricia explained advances, publishing timelines, the reality of the industry. Nothing would happen overnight. Even if they sold the book quickly, it would be a year before it hit shelves. But the advance would be real money. Enough to make a dent in the medical debt, maybe enough to let him quit one of his jobs. After he hung up, Marcus sat in the silence of his garage for a long time. Through the window, he could see Sarah moving around the kitchen, washing dishes, humming to herself. She looked lighter lately, happier. The fear that had haunted her eyes since her diagnosis had started to fade. They were going to be okay, not immediately, not magically, but eventually. Because Marcus had taken a crazy chance on something that shouldn't have worked. Because he'd written stories on napkins in a deli. Because sometimes the universe handed you opportunities disguised as panic attacks and viral videos. His phone buzzed. An email from Jennifer Hartley, the first woman who'd hired him to speak. Subject line, "Consulting opportunity, 6-month contract." Marcus opened it with shaking hands. She wanted to hire him as a consultant for her entire business. 6 months part-time, teaching her speakers how to be more authentic, more connected, more real. 20 hours a week at $100 an hour. Marcus did the math 3 times to make sure he hadn't misread. $2,000 a week, $8,000 a month for 20 hours instead of 80. Make the knowledge worth more than the labor. Ray had been right. Ray had been so completely, impossibly right. Tomorrow, Marcus would give notice at Menard's. Next week, he talked to Tommy about reducing his construction hours. The debt wasn't gone, but for the first time in 3 years, he could see a path through it that didn't end with him working himself to death. He pulled out a fresh napkin. He carried them everywhere now, a habit from Shapiro's, and started writing. "This is the story of how I learned that sometimes the worst moment of your life is actually the doorway to something better." The words flowed easily, the way they always did now. Marcus wrote until his hand cramped, then wrote some more. Outside, Indianapolis slept. Inside, a construction worker who'd stumbled into becoming something else kept writing, kept building, kept discovering that the skills that made him good at his old life were exactly the skills he needed for his new one. The only difference was now people were willing to pay him what those skills were actually worth. 18 months later, Marcus Bennett sat in his financial advisor's office on Monument Circle, looking at numbers that still didn't feel real. To summarize, Karen Mitchell said, between the book advance, speaking fees, and consulting contracts, you've cleared $220,000 after taxes. The medical debt is paid off and Emma's tuition is covered through graduation. Sarah squeezed his hand. Her grip was strong. She'd been in remission for 8 months now. You did it, Marcus. You climbed out. Walking out of the office into the crisp April afternoon, Marcus felt the sun on his face and tried to process what had just happened. $340,000 in debt, the number that had haunted his nightmares, that had pressed on his chest like a physical weight, was gone. Not diminished, not reduced. Gone. How are you feeling? Sarah asked as they walked hand in hand around Monument Circle, dodging tourists taking photos of the Soldiers and Sailors Monument. Confused, grateful, terrified it's all going to disappear. That's fair. It is kind of miraculous when you think about it. It's completely insane. I wrote stories on napkins, Sarah, and now we're debt-free and I'm somehow a consultant, an author and speaker. Don't forget handsome. You're also handsome. Marcus laughed, the sound coming easier these days. I'm 53 and grey. Distinguished grey, there's a difference. They ended up at Shapiro's because some traditions were too good to break. Derek greeted them like celebrities, which still made Marcus uncomfortable. The man, the myth, the legend, Derek announced to the entire deli. Several people looked up, and Marcus caught at least 3 doing double takes. Derek, please, I'm just here for pastrami. Just here for pastrami, he says, like he didn't just publish a book that's been on the New York Times bestseller list for 6 weeks. The book, Building Something That Lasts, Lessons from a Life in Construction. Marcus still couldn't walk past a bookstore without feeling like he was going to throw up. His face was on the cover. Patricia had insisted. His words were in print. People were reading them, reviewing them, sending him messages about how the book had changed their perspective on work, on life, on what mattered. It was wonderful and terrifying in equal measure. They slid into their usual booth. Maria brought coffee without being asked. Through the window, Marcus could see Indianapolis moving through its Saturday rhythm, the city that had been his home for 53 years, that had witnessed his struggles and his unlikely transformation. I saw Carlos yesterday, Marcus said. He's running his own crew now on that new development off of East 10th Street. That's wonderful. You trained him well. He told me he's using the stuff I taught him, not just the construction stuff, the leadership things. How to create a culture where people feel valued. Marcus stirred his coffee, watching the cream swirl. He said I changed his life. You changed a lot of lives, Marcus, including ours. Emma arrived 20 minutes later, sliding into the booth with the energy of a 24-year-old who'd just aced her final exams. She was graduating from Butler in 3 weeks, her graphic design degree finally complete. Guess what? She said, not waiting for them to guess. I got a job offer, design firm downtown, good salary, benefits, the whole package. Emma, that's incredible. Sarah pulled her into a hug across the table. It gets better. They follow Dad's Facebook page. The hiring manager said she liked that I came from a family that valued hard work and authenticity. Emma grinned at Marcus. Basically, Dad, your internet fame got me a job. That's not how that works, Marcus protested, but he was smiling. Sure it is. Everything's connected. You took a chance on something weird and it rippled out. Now I get to start my career without student debt. Mom's healthy, and you don't look like you're going to collapse from exhaustion every time I see you. Derek brought their food. He'd memorized their orders years ago, and sat down with them for a minute, something he only did on slow days. So what's next? Derek asked. Another book? World speaking tour? Construction consulting empire? Marcus had been thinking about that question a lot lately. The speaking requests kept coming. Patricia wanted to discuss a second book. Jennifer had offered him a partnership in her consulting business. The world was suddenly full of opportunities that hadn't existed 2 years ago. Honestly, Marcus said, I'm thinking about going back to construction, part-time. Everyone at the table stared at him. What? Sarah asked carefully. Why? Because I miss it. The creating things with my hands, The smell of sawdust, the satisfaction of watching a building go up. I don't want to do it 80 hours a week anymore, but maybe 10 or 15 hours? Enough to stay connected to what made me who I am. Sarah studied his face, then nodded slowly. That actually makes sense. You always were happiest when you were building something. Plus, Marcus added, I can't write authentically about construction work if I'm not actually doing it anymore. The stories have to stay real. See, this is why people like you, Emma said. You could totally fake it at this point. Just coast on what you've already done. But you won't? Because you're annoyingly genuine. I prefer authentically genuine. Same thing, Dad. They ate and talked and laughed, the conversation flowing easily the way it did when life wasn't crushing you under impossible weight. Marcus looked at his family, his wife, healthy and happy, her eyes bright with life, his daughter confident and employed and finishing her degree, and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Pure, uncomplicated peace. After lunch, Marcus drove to the construction site where he'd worked that terrible November day 18 months ago. The building was finished now, a gleaming apartment complex on East Washington Street. Tommy Chen was there, overseeing some finishing touches. Bennett, long time no see. Come to slum it with the working class? Actually, I came to ask if you need a part-time consultant, someone to train your crews, solve problems, maybe work a few hours a week. Tommy's eyebrows rose. You're serious? I figured you were done with construction forever. Turns out I'm not done, just needed to do it on my terms. Marcus looked up at the building, at the work of dozens of hands over hundreds of hours. Besides, I miss it. The making things, the teamwork, the physical proof that you accomplished something. I could use you. Got 3 projects starting this summer. Crew training would be huge. Tommy extended his hand. Welcome back, Bennett. Though fair warning, we expect you to sign autographs now. Don't start. That evening, Marcus sat in his garage office and wrote on a Shapiro's napkin. 2 years ago, I was drowning in debt. Today, I'm free. Not because of luck, but because I learned that your value isn't measured by hours worked. It's measured by the knowledge you share and the courage to bet on yourself. Sarah appeared with tea. Working. Reflecting. Marcus pulled her close. I keep thinking about how close we came to giving up. But you didn't. They sat watching the sunset over Indianapolis. A notification popped up. Construction Chronicles had hit 500,000 followers. Ray was right all along, Marcus said. So thank him. Marcus called Menards. Ray answered, helping a customer with door hinges. Ray, it's Marcus Bennett. I wanted to say thank you. You changed my life. A pause. I didn't change anything, kid. You did the work. I just pointed out the obvious. Now come visit sometime. I want you to sign my copy of your book. After Ray hung up, Marcus answered an email from an Ohio construction worker asking for advice. Someone had helped him once. Now it was his turn. Through the window, Indianapolis sparkled with evening lights. Somewhere Derek was serving customers at Shapiro's. Emma was designing something brilliant. Carlos was building something that would last. And Marcus Bennett was exactly where he needed to be, building something that lasted, one story at a time.